We'll go ahead and get started here. Welcome to this Colorado wildfire legislation and implementation conversation with some of our state agencies responsible for the wildfire legislation that came out this last session. I think you all came in on mute, but we will keep some of this informal as we were going down the road and we have questions. We'll have a space after each presenter for that. Closed captioning is enabled, so if you would like to have the written words across your screen, there should be a CC feature at the bottom of your Zoom CC icon that you can show those if that's helpful to you. Also, I would request that you update your name if your name is not your full name, and add the organization that you're with. That would be very helpful. So in the participant window or next to your name, there should be 3 dots and 3 stacked dots, and you can click on that and make sure it's got your name and add your organization, or we can even play acronym soup there and see if we can guess your name acronym. And then please do open the chat. That is enabled. This is set up as a regular Zoom meeting, so we will be using that feature to share with one another. Feel free to introduce yourselves in that space, and that's where we'll also take questions if you don't feel like coming off mute when we get to those. I'm Rebecca Samolsky. I'm the Director for Fire Adapted Colorado. We're a statewide network for wildfire resilience professionals. Our mission is to connect and empower wildfire resilience leaders to improve wildfire outcomes in Colorado communities and landscapes. We've held a couple legislative updates during sessions over the last couple of years, and a lot of legislation went through this year that affects our wildfire resilience work. So wanted to give some space to get updates from our agency partners on how that is going and what the plans are to implement. I want our wildfire resilience professionals around the state to be successful in helping to implement and fully utilize these new pieces of legislation. And give our agency partners who are responsible for implementing them an opportunity to gather your input and support, or find additional opportunities to do that in the future if they need your support with implementation. So we are going to run through presentations from a variety of state agency partners on what has passed, the purpose of it, and kind of where they're at with implementation right now, and if they have any questions, clarifying questions from you, or questions about how things are going to move forward. So our first team, we're going to run through with Department of Natural Resources, then the Colorado State Forest Service, followed by Department of Regulatory Agencies, Division of Insurance, Department of Public Safety, Division of Fire Prevention and Control. So those are our teams today to share with you. So thank you, Allie Lurch, for pulling up, or Angela Bogue, one of you who's sharing the Department of Natural Resources presentation for us and what you have to share. Angela Bogue is the Assistant Director of Climate and Forest Health with the Department of Natural Resources. And Allison Lurch is the Wildfire Mitigation Program Administrator for DNR. So take it away.
Great, thanks so much, Becca. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. As Becca said, I'm Angela Bogue. I'm the Assistant Director for Climate and Forest Health at the Colorado Department of Natural Resources. And Allison Lurch is here with me today. She runs our Colorado Strategic Wildfire Action Program, COSWAP, which she'll speak to a little bit more. Unfortunately, our Ledge Director, Daphne Gervais, could not attend this afternoon, but hopefully some of you had the opportunity to interact with her this past Ledge session. This was her first year with DNR. She did a fantastic job. So next winter, when the next Ledge session kicks off, she will be your point of contact for the Department of Natural Resources overall when it comes to Ledge issues. So next slide. So I'm going to start off just with a really quick departmental snapshot. I think most folks on the call understand the role that DNR plays in the state when it comes to wildfire, but if not, I'll just provide a really quick overview. Next slide, Allie. So, DNR, we are really the state natural resources agency. We help to manage all of the relevant natural resources in the state, everything from extractive industries on the oil and gas side of things, the mining side, coal, et cetera. We have an avalanche program around avalanche risk mitigation, but, really relevant to this conversation today, we do have a division of forestry in statute, and it is staffed by the Colorado State Forest Service. So you're going to hear from James Lucero today about their programs and some of the updates from last ledge session. And then, I think relevant on the water side, our Water Conservation Board is really that lead water policy agency in the state. They also deal with issues like post-fire flooding and debris flows, post-fire, sort of hydrological hazards. And so they have some important programming that I'll just provide a quick update on today. And then also around sort of watershed restoration. And I think that's also an important piece of the wildfire conversation. So next slide. DNR also now administers what's called the Forest Health Council. This used to live in the State Forest Service, but a couple of years ago, it moved over to the DNR Executive Director's Office. This is a state council of diverse forest management stakeholders, everybody from the timber industry, environmental organizations, county commissioners, recreation interests are represented, and others. And their role in statute is to provide recommendations, both to the legislature, but then also to the governor on forest management. The Forest Health Council also has a joint subcommittee that's running right now with the Colorado Fire Commission on prescribed fire. So that's always a topic of interest, obviously, and it's something that both commissions are digging into right now. The Forest Health Council is currently developing legislative recommendations for 2024. So they're right in the middle of that this summer. They will publish their annual report and make those recommendations to the legislature and to the governor within the next month or two. I think important for this group to know, Forest Health Council is always open to the public. You can attend virtual meetings. All of our meetings have a virtual component. We also take public comment, and I'll put the link after I'm done to tomorrow's meeting, which is our upcoming quarterly meeting. Tomorrow, they're meeting virtually from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Public comment is taken towards the end. So around sort of 11:30, 11:45. And again, we're always open to suggestions on future topics for the council to learn about or discuss. Next slide. And Allie, I think this is where I kick it over to you.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for having us today. I'm Allie Lurch, the Wildfire Mitigation Program Administrator, working alongside Angela and others in the Department of Natural Resources to administer and develop the Colorado Strategic Wildfire Action Program, or otherwise known as COSWAP. COSWAP was born out of the 2020 wildfire season, where a historic investment at that time was made through state stimulus dollars of $17.5 million. And that investment is supposed to be very strategic and follows Senate Bill 21258, which outlines a few pillars of importance. One is to fund strategic on-the-ground projects, fuels reduction projects, and landscape scale projects as well. It also has a focus on workforce development and training, specifically working with the Colorado Youth Corps Association and the Department of Corrections State Wildland Inmate Fire Teams, or SWIFT teams. And then last, as previously mentioned, we support landscape scale projects. And all of this with the focus of protecting life, property, and infrastructure. I know many of you on this meeting have either attended previous presentations about COSWAP, but we're very excited to be able to announce and to share that COSWAP is now a permanent program, where it was initially just a one-time investment from that 2021 legislative session. To date, with that initial investment, we've been able to support 54 projects statewide, and many of those are in strategic focus areas that were also part of the legislation for DNR and other interagency partners to come together and work collaboratively to select areas across the state to be able to do more targeted investments. And so we have 10 strategic focus areas right now, and that's where our landscape scale, landscape resilience investment program really focuses on. Those areas are the 3 Rocky Mountain Restoration Initiative focal areas, and then 7 counties, Larimer, Boulder, Jefferson, Teller, Douglas, El Paso, and La Plata. That's all I'm going to share right now, and Angela is going to continue with some legislative updates.
Thanks, Allie. So yeah, quick recap of last leg session, which I missed. I was on maternity leave. So Allie, feel free to chime in here if you have anything to add. But as Allie said, CoSWAP became a permanent program, which is really exciting. Next slide, Allie. And that is funded with $5 million per year of ongoing severance tax funding through SB 23-139. So we're currently in the process of, making those longer term program plans, really what it's going to look like moving forward. We also were fortunate to receive $1 million in ongoing general fund. So per year, so 6 million total per year. And then also last year received 5 million in one-time severance tax funding. So, I think given this funding and, given our statutory authority, you can expect that moving forward, we will have future opportunities. For instance, for our workforce development grant program, we're looking at doing a release of that later this summer. And then we're in a planning process right now to do subsequent releases of our landscape resilience investment program. This funding is wonderful. Last leg session, they didn't really make substantive changes to the statutory authorities for our program. So we're still generally guided by, the original mission of CoSWAP, which was to direct funding to priority areas to really protect life, property, and infrastructure, and then also support workforce development when it comes to wildfire mitigation. Next slide. Another bill that I wanted to highlight from last session is relevant to the watershed restoration work that I was discussing with the Colorado Water Conservation Board. So SB 23-270, projects to restore natural stream systems. This was, a challenging bill to move through. Basically, it addresses the very real tension between water rights and stream and watershed restoration projects. So I think there is both real and sometimes perhaps not so real perceptions of potential injuries to water rights by watershed restoration projects, whether they're things like restoring sort of the natural meanders of stream systems, restoring aquatic vegetation, that type of work. And so we really wanted to help reduce that friction and provide some legal clarity. And so this bill did pass a much narrower version, I think, of what was originally proposed. And basically it provides clarification that minor stream restoration activities, do not pose a serious threat to water rights. I can link the legislation, you can read through it sort of for more details. But, I think why this is relevant to highlight is that we have seen situations where wet meadows or beaver dam ecosystems do provide sort of a fire break or can help watersheds be more resilient to fires. And so there's a desire on DNR's part to push this conversation forward further this next legislative session and see if we can pass some legislation that will also address larger scale watershed restoration activities. So keep an eye out for that. And then I think the very last thing I'll highlight, if folks are hopefully familiar, the CWCB has completed their assessment and have an ongoing program called the Wildfire Ready Watersheds Program. This is a program that provides funding both for planning and implementation of, basically post-fire hazard mitigation. So I'll put the link in the chat there to that program, but happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you both.
Oh, I have one more slide. Sorry, Becca.
Oh,
Things. So we were also asked to provide a bit of an update on some past legislation. SB 21-258, if folks were around a couple of years ago, that was the legislation that created COSWAP. It also required the state to perform an organizational assessment of wildfire mitigation programs across State Forest Service, DFPC, DNR, and other agencies. And so we're in the process of working with Arup, an international consulting firm, on that assessment. The report is due to be completed this fall, and it will be shared publicly once it's complete. So some of you may have been contacted for interviews or surveys related to that work. And then lastly, in 2022, we also received some federal funding for COSWAP that needs to be focused on sort of watershed or water infrastructure focused watershed or forest restoration projects. And so we are working on that funding release, and it will likely come out next year. Thanks.
thank you, Angela and Allie. Appreciate that very much. For the sake of time, I'm going to ask people to put their questions in chat for now. If you have a question that you don't want to lose track of, for these ladies, we'll get to it after we get through some other pieces of legislation. So please do track on that and drop your questions in the chat. Next, and as the State Forestry Agency for the state of Colorado State Forest Service, James Lucero, the Associate Director for Policy and Legislative Affairs, is going to give us some updates from their perspective.
Thank you, Rebecca. Glad to join all of you today. I don't have a lot of slides. We actually didn't have a lot of legislation pass that directly affects wildfire interests. We did have some legislation pass that we wanted to touch base with this group on, and kind of how we can use that to start to implement some of the program that is required from it moving forward. The first bill that I wanted to touch base on is the nursery bill. That was actually part of the Wildfire Reviews Committee package. They passed that bill, and basically it gave us more funding. We had some one-time funding proposed last year. This added an additional $5 million to that proposed $5 million we got last year. This is for renovations and just for nursery upgrades. Basically, where we are in that process, we are waiting for the Colorado State University facilities to select an architectural and engineering firm to start handling some of those renovations. Some of those renovations that are being proposed are updating our greenhouses, rebuilding and expanding shade structures, bare root field upgrades, and overhauling our irrigation system, seed storage, seedling processing improvements, and delivery trucks. I think what would affect this group the most, I think directly, is those delivery trucks. Having the refrigerated trucks to bring those actual baby trees to the needed areas where there's going to be some reforestation after wildfire, I think is something that we definitely needed. The other bill that I wanted to bring to this group's attention, which we'll probably hear a lot more from the Department of Education, is Senate Bill 5. That was also part of the Wildfire Reviews Committee package last year. And it tasks the Colorado State Forest Service with a few things. Many of those will not have a direct nexus to wildfire mitigation and the work around that. But some of the things that the bill is tasked the Forest Service with doing is developing educational materials on career opportunities in forestry and wildfire risk mitigation. So we'll probably be reaching out to organizations like this to see where those openings are, what those openings are, because once we develop the educational materials, we're supposed to distribute them to high school guidance counselors and students. That way that they know that this option exists after graduation. The other thing, and an exciting thing that this bill actually did, is we get to basically administer an internship program. We get to do it in partnership with the timber industry writ large. Basically, it's creating this incentive for timber industry businesses and organizations to find students and through the grant that is given in this bill, CSU will actually fund part of that intern's salary per se while they're working with the timber industry. And so it's not really being completely fleshed out just yet. When we received that money, it came under the assumption that we were going to be doing about $5,000 for about 15 different internships. And so that amounts to about $75,000. That could fluctuate based on those positions that those interns land in. But this one has kind of been put on hold right now, kind of creating the process for all of this, at least in the CSF's kind of, I guess, part in it, mostly because the program kind of administrator that was working on getting this one up and running had to unfortunately take just a leave of absence due to some family emergencies. And so we actually have not started the process in actually meeting as a stakeholder group and a steering committee to see how we actually want to move forward. But that's what has happened so far. That passed last year that affects the Colorado State Forest Service and has a nexus to Wildfire and this group. But like Rebecca said, I don't really know where we're going to be going in the future until we get this steering group and the committee going for Senate Bill 5. But if this committee and this organization has any kind of input that they'd like to send my way, that way I can take that to the implementation group, I'd be happy to take that. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that come through at the very end, but really short, quick, sweet, to the point. Not a whole lot is affecting the Forest Service when it comes to Wildfire this year. Thank you for the time, Rebecca.
Thank you so much, James. And just to keep going on the same piece of legislation, I'm gonna invite Corey Evans, the Senior Budget Policy Analyst with the Department of Higher Education, to join us and share where you guys are at so far and you're part of that legislation.
Absolutely. Can everyone hear me okay?
Sound good?
Okay, thank you. So thank you for having me here. I'm also have a very brief update for Senate Bill 23005. The department was tasked with, we had about $1.9 million into creating and expanding existing forestry programs within our institutions of higher ed. Currently, we are beginning the steps of working on our grant process and how we're going to do that. We will likely be reaching out to a lot of stakeholders here for input. This is one of our first times implementing such a program like this, especially with wildfire and forestry. So we definitely could use some guidance and expertise here. And we're just currently kind of just starting that process here. We're hoping to get some information out and get the information over to the provost at the institutions to get their recommendations as well. And we're in the process of passing through some of the dollars to CSU for some of the programs that they've been tasked with starting for this as well. More than happy to take questions at the end. It's a very brief update, so I apologize if I don't have more there.
No worries. And Corey, I will just, for your sake, say that you kind of got roped into this very last minute. So really appreciate you being here and being able to speak from the Department of Higher Education side and help me out here and just kind of trying to give the overview of that part of the forestry and wildfire mitigation workforce grant. So there is a portion that's also coming through to the Department of Higher Education for a couple of things. One is to pass through money to purchase a simulator for a harvester, I believe.
Yes. It's about $100,000.
Okay, and then the other piece is really around recruitment of people to help teach forestry and wildfire mitigation at community colleges and or universities around the state.
Yep, you got that pretty correct. It's about $1.8 million for the next 2 years.
Okay, so there's a couple of years of funding for that, and yeah, I think we do have a few minutes. I'll unspotlight you and maybe just ask those of the folks who have presented so far to come back on camera, and we'll take a few-minute break before we jump into Peg telling us about insurance here, because we have a few minutes for some questions right here about what you've heard so far. Let's break up the presentations for a minute. And thank you, Mary just mentioned that CSFS has a new guide for homeowners on a new plant guide, fire resistant plant guide. So that's great. Maybe somebody has a link, drop it in there too, because I've had a hard time finding the PDF of that online. But new resource, not new legislation, but definitely a cool new resource. If you have a question, please come off mute. I'll look for people popping off mute. Any questions in the chat? Oh my goodness, they covered it so well already. Got it all figured out. Okay, well, you guys will think of more and just think about how can we help with what you've heard so far. You know, how can we help these state agencies be successful in building that workforce, getting the stream restoration information out there, fully utilizing co-swap and being ready with the capacity around that, being ready to get your plants to get those growing. Okay. Thank you all. And now I'm going to go ahead and invite Peg Brown, the Commissioner for Property and Casualty Insurance with the Department of Regulatory Affairs Division of Insurance. I think I said that wrong. Department of Regulatory A. What's the A for? You can fix me, Peg.
We're the Department of Regulatory Agencies.
Agencies. Okay, I think I got it right in practice. Thank you. There was a couple important pieces of insurance legislation that went through, so thank you for being here to share these.
Well, and thank you. And it's actually exciting to be asked to present to this group and to work with this group because, you know, while we're focused on insurance and particularly insurance for homeowners in the wildfire setting, we know that mitigation and resilience are key aspects that we need to get the insurance companies to focus on. So start out, and what do? We regulate the insurance industry in Colorado, including all types of insurance. I always say that it's from animals and pet insurance through title insurance, homeowners, life, health, auto. It's literally all times. We even regulate bail bonds. But we also serve as a resource for Colorado citizens about insurance, and we investigate their complaints and challenges with their insurance company and their insurance coverage, and we answer consumer questions and provide education. And I can tell you from experience that when we have a wildfire that affects people's homes, we are one of the first ones at the disaster recovery centers to help people address their insurance issues. So it's a little weird because I don't see it. Insurance-related legislation coming out this session was right out of the Marshall Fire. We had House Bill 231174, which was homeowners insurance to address the particular problem of underinsurance, and House Bill 1288, the Fair Access to Insurance Requirements Plan. And I'll discuss each of these in a little bit more detail. The homeowners 1174, the underinsurance, it was needed because the data we collected from the Marshall Fire indicated that many of the homeowners were underinsured, that their insurance coverage did not fully insure them from to protect them against total loss due to fire or wind or anything else. And we also found from both anecdotes and studies that we did that homeowners were not sufficiently aware of their options to purchase additional coverage that could help with rebuilding costs and processes. We have a little bit of a lag here. Um,
I just went ahead and if it's all right, so that you can see your stuff.
Okay.
It was progressing, so I'm just gonna steal that from you and help
okay,
pass your slides if that helps.
that's great. You can advance 2 slides.
All right.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so as part of 1174, we're identifying factors that insurers must consider in determining the reconstruction cost of a dwelling. We will be establishing an annual report prepared by an independent entity to study the reconstruction costs and specific rebuilding expenses. One of the challenges that we particularly noted in the Marshall Fire was that getting the estimates of what a rebuild cost was varied substantially, and that we found that it would be very important to have an independent basis that could kind of establish some baselines for those costs. So we will be putting out to contract. This won't be available until, I believe, June of 2024, but we'll be working on the contract to get this out. And I anticipate that we'll be working with one of the higher education entities, as I anticipate they will be very well placed to help with this. We're also requiring insurers to offer inflation protection coverage and increased minimum offers of law and ordinance and extended replacement cost coverage. All 3 of these are means to try and get the insurance coverage up so that it alleviates the underinsurance problem, but it also protects against things. In the Marshall Fire, we had building codes that had changed substantially after homes were built. And so building to the new building codes, including the energy code, carry some cost with them, and we need to make sure that folks are covered in that. That is particularly covered under law and ordinance. We also, if you recall, the Marshall Fire was on the heels of COVID. We were still all in masks at the Disaster Recovery Center. We also had a shortage of contractors. We had a shortage of building supplies. We had high beginning of the high rates of inflation. And so all of those are factored into what the ultimate cost is, and then making sure that the insurance coverage matches that cost. Next slide. So we also require insurers to disclose to consumers information on all the premiums, because the law and ordinance, the inflation protection, those are voluntary or discretionary coverages. And if a homeowner is trying to contain their premium, they may reject them. But we require the insurers to disclose to consumers what the premium would have been, because most of these coverages are not large dollars, and they're important pieces of coverage. We want consumers to be aware of what they're doing. We also increased the time requirements from 30 days to 60 days before insurers cancel or non-renew their homeowner's policy. This is particularly important because, as I'm sure you have read, we are in a tightening insurance market with what's happening in California and Florida in particular, but we are also experiencing it in Colorado, that insurers are pulling back from the amount of coverage they will provide and where they will provide coverage. And sometimes it's getting much tougher for carriers for consumers to find insurance. Next slide. The other piece of legislation that was enacted last year was to establish a FAIR plan for Colorado. Colorado was one of more than a handful, a few states that do not have a fair access to insurance plan. And basically what a fair plan is an insurer of last resort. It is to provide property insurance coverage for homeowners and businesses when insurance companies refuse coverage, either due to high risk or they are withdrawing from a particular area. The FAIR Plan establishes a nonprofit, unincorporated entity. It is set up with a board of directors to be, in effect, a insurer of last resort, and the Division of Insurance supervises the FAIR Plan. Next slide. The FAIR Plan, the premiums are designed to cover the costs of a potential loss, but if necessary, the entity could assess insurers to cover costs. We have to set up something that would be realistically not put people into a position where the FAIR Plan is not paid for by the premiums and the other insurers have to step up. So that's the balance we're trying to strike. The FAIR Plan would complement and not compete with the private market. To get coverage under the FAIR Plan, the individuals and businesses would have to be unable to find coverage in from the regular market. And the coverage is also limited. It's going to be high cost. It's also limited, but it does provide insurance, which is key to mortgage eligibility and things like that. The coverage will provide up to $750,000 in property insurance coverage and up to $5 million in commercial property insurance to eligible individuals and businesses. We know that is, those are arbitrary limits, but to create the balance, those are the limits that the legislature set. Next slide. As we're beginning to implement these pieces of legislation, we are holding a series of stakeholder meetings around homeowners insurance topics. Some of that will be both accessibility of insurance and affordability of insurance. We have not yet finalized the schedule for these meetings, but they will be late summer and early fall. And you can always sign on to the Division of Insurance's website for announcements of those and get yourself included on our announcements list. Next slide. We also have legislation that came through last year that we are continuing to work on. House Bill 1111 on wildfire disasters. It set new parameters for coverage for wildfires and homeowners. It increased the limits and increased a number of the requirements on insurance companies as to how they deal with their consumers. Then we had Senate Bill 206, which was disaster preparedness, and provided us resources that we use to study to prepare the legislation and implementation of the underinsurance and FAIR plans. And with that, I think here is the contact information for the Division of Insurance.
Great.
I think we have one question that I saw come in.
Yeah. Philip, do you want to come off mute? And I know maybe some of that's a little bit tongue-in-cheek to an extent, but would you like to ask your question?
Sure. Sorry, I'm outside actually slashing trees today. We live in a rural county, Grand County, lots of wooey wild and urban interface communities. And a recurring issue is insurance rates are going up. Property taxes are outrageous this year. And we encourage people to then spend more money by mitigating their property or changing out their house vents. And they go, why? I get no credit for it. Maybe I reduce my risk. Maybe there'll be a fire, maybe not. why can't I get an insurance discount for doing work on my house? And I have no response for that as a mitigation person. So something posted on the insurance website would be helpful, so at least can point them to what the logic is of the state and the regulatory regime for such things. Thanks.
Absolutely, and it is something that we have been looking at and are looking at our colleagues in California. California has instituted the wildfire prepared home, and which I see Dwayne has a question about, and Firewise recognition programs on mitigation. The challenge that we've faced in Colorado, and that is now coming home to us, is that insurers won't consider the mitigation efforts for a premium reduction, but they will consider it for whether they will provide coverage. And as we are moving into this new era where obtaining coverage is going to be a challenge, we anticipate that more and more insurance companies are going to utilize a homeowner's mitigation to determine whether they will even write the coverage. So that's the conundrum that we're facing. Absolutely support mitigation and the variety of studies. But, you know, our regulatory hands are tied if the companies are choosing to just leave areas.
Do you want to speak any more to Dwayne's question specifically around the IBHS wildfire prepared home, and if there's any look at that, and or Raina suggested just in general home ignition zone assessment and mitigation requirements for the programs that are being updated and developed?
We ask that the insurance companies take all of this into account, particularly the IBHS standard, because IBHS is established by the insurance companies. It is funded by the insurance companies, and we ask that they utilize that in making their determinations. The home ignition zone assessment is actually even a part of that. And it is not at this point a requirement in the FAIR plan, the policies that will be available in the FAIR plan, but I think as the board sets those policies, it's certainly an issue that will come up.
Yeah, that would be great. I imagine some folks from this group would be great to help weigh in on that, and also just past discussions with some folks who are on here around IBHS versus other home ignition zone assessment and mitigation programs that already exist around the state, and trying to find that balance where there's not just one method that's recognized, but the science that's solid behind reducing home ignitions is acknowledged in determining whether homes are insurable. So thank you so much. We'll have Tom, I'm going to save yours for just to keep this moving, and we'll come back to your insurance question. But I'm really glad you could be here, because our group always has a lot of questions, ends up having to interpret what's happening in the insurance world back out to people they're working with in their communities. So really appreciate you being here, and we'll capture more questions in a few minutes. I'm going to try and take you off spotlight here. And our last area of legislation is in the Department of Public Safety. And we have Joel Maleka, our legislative liaison for the Colorado Department of Public Safety, as well as Chris Burnett, our Fire and Life Safety Section Chief with the Division of Fire Prevention and Control. And looks like you guys have an order of operations there in terms of who's talking about what. So I will let you guys take it away and tell us what you got this session.
Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with everybody today and kind of talk through some of the things that impacted the Department of Public Safety. Just in the interest of time, I invited our chief of our Fire and Life Safety Division, Chris Burnett, to speak to kind of some of the updates on two of the more high profile bills that came out, our resiliency grant and our WUI code board. So I'm just going to kind of let Chris go directly to where we're at on those, and then if there's questions now or going forward about as those two programs are developed, happy to take those or direct those to Chris. But really, Chris is kind of our subject matter expert in that space, and I'll turn it over to him.
Great. Thank you, Joel. And Becca, thank you so much for inviting us on today. This is great. I'm glad to see so many people on and interested. Like Joel and Becca said, my name is Chris Brunette. I am the chief of the Fire and Life Safety section here with the Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control. Just a brief background, we're part of the Department of Public Safety. So as you can imagine, our main concern is the safety of the public. And with the Division of Fire Prevention and Control, that is the safety of the public from fire, wildfire, or otherwise. And so some good legislation came out this year to help us, especially in the prevention realm for wildland fire, especially in regards to the wildland urban interface. And so the two I'd like to talk about today are first, House Bill 1273, which House Bill 1273 establishes the Wildfire Resilient Homes Grant Program. That's going to reside in the Fire and Life Safety section. And the idea there is to provide a grant program where we can incentivize the hardening of existing homes in the wildland urban interface. So there's still some work to be done there. The bill came along with $100,000 that we can use towards the grants or towards education this year. And I'm going to put my contact information in the chat here. We would really like to hear from you all as we start to build out that program and understand what opportunities are out there that will help us make the most impact and leverage that $100,000 towards home hardening. And so I feel like there's a lot of people here who work on this every day and maybe have some good ideas of how we can really make the most of that $100,000. But in addition to that, we need to develop the rules behind this grant program and what the process is going to be for applying for it. And so we're going to be having stakeholder sessions. If you're interested in participating in those, we please invite you to do that. And again, email me and we'll make sure that once we start having those stakeholder meetings, we'll invite you and get your input for that. So those are the two things, especially with this program, where I invite your input and would love to hear from you. So there's my email address in the chat. And with that, I will move on to the second piece of legislation that came out of this session, which is Senate Bill 166. That establishes the Wildfire Resiliency Code Board. This one is probably got a lot of interest statewide. It's a departure from what we typically do in Colorado. This code board will be established to determine a statewide wildland urban interface code. And to do that, they are also going to have to establish where it applies in Colorado, then also what the enforcement mechanisms look like. We're just getting started on this. However, the board has to be up and running by the end of September. September 30th is when all the members of this board should be in place. And we are also trying to get 2 employees up and running. Those are currently advertised and hopefully we'll get those folks hired in the next month. That is for a code board administrator who will really help the code board do everything they need to do to meet the requirements of the statute, but then an administrative assistant that will help with the everyday administrative tasks of this code board and that code board administrator. So those are coming out soon. I'm not going to go over the entire composition of the board, but I do want to just briefly touch on that. The board is going to be comprised of 21 voting members and 3 non-voting ex officio members, representative of all types of industries and communities, from fire and building code professionals to statewide organizations for commercial and residential building, urban communities, rural communities, you name it, they're represented on this board just about, which is a good thing, especially when we're going into this territory of a new statewide code for the wildland urban interface. And just the last thing on that, they're appointed by various members of the legislature or our executive director of the Department of Public Safety. So 4 of the members are appointed by the Speaker of the House, 3 by the President of the Senate, 10 are appointed by our executive director here at the Department of Public Safety, 2 by the minority leader of the Senate, and then 2 by the minority leader of the House. And then the 3 ex officio members are the director of the Division of Fire Prevention and Control or his or her designee, the state forester or his or her designee, and the director of the Colorado Resiliency Office or their designee. So those appointments should be coming out soon. So if you're interested, also let me know. We'll make sure that you hear about those, the requests for appointment once those get going by all those members. Otherwise, unless I missed something, Joel, I think I turn it over to you.
I think that covered everything pretty well. You know, I think for everybody that's kind of paying attention, there's not a whole lot of development yet out of those 2 bills, but we're excited to see where those go. And certainly as those continue to move forward, you know, we want to make sure we're a resource for people who have questions as those kind of things get more built out. But I know there's not a whole lot of time left. So Rebecca, I'll turn it back over to you in case there's questions that come up or any other parts of the agenda.
Okay. Well, we do have plenty of time held for Q&A. So I did want to ask Joel to you or Chris, if you do want to do just a very quick, people are going to put questions in the chat for that. Please also prepare your questions for everybody here. I know that people are curious about what started as a more robust evacuation and clearance time bill, any suppression stuff, if you want to give a quick highlight of some of those things that were passed.
So the clearance modeling bill, that was turned into a study that DHSEM is doing. And that really is determining kind of what resources are needed from the local emergency managers. How can we best serve them in producing those evacuation models? That's also still fairly new. So I don't know that we're going to have information on that until probably closer to the end of the year. But you know, that was an example of a bill that kind of started out very ambitiously in terms of requiring something, and then we were able to scale that back to say what kind of needs are out there, and really what's the you know, maybe more focused on, you know, for the localities and the regions that are producing these. Are there things that resources that could help them make those models more effective? So that's how the bill ultimately ended up, and we're in the process of implementing that study and reaching out to the local emergency managers to complete that legislation.
Great, thank you for that additional update. Let's see, I'm gonna try to remove spotlights so we can see everybody who's been presenting. And if you were sharing, please come back on camera for a minute. Sorry, I'm kicking my loud desk. Please come back on. And I know we had at least one more insurance question, so I want to get back to that. And then please go ahead and just raise your hand if you have a question. I'll get to you in the order that we go through here. I think we had one more insurance question. Yeah, Tom, do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Sure. Thank you for allowing me to do that. My question was, can the Insurance Commission require insurance companies to provide insurability to homeowners if those homeowners have met a science-based home ignition zone assessment and mitigation program that's similar to what they're doing in California outside of what IBHS is doing? And they've established what that standard is, and it seemed like that they were requiring it there, but I also understand it's private business and they can choose to pull out if they want. I just wondered if there's any requirements that can happen on the part of the Division of Insurance.
We're always looking at what we can do to encourage the companies, but requiring the companies is a bit of a different story. if we require too much, then they do leave. And that's a bit of the situation in California. Obviously, it's not one for one. There are lots of factors, but we're trying to take that into account. And as we first try to do just availability of insurance and making sure that we have insurance availability, then we can go to incorporating the mitigation standards.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Peg. Steve?
Hey everyone, hopefully you can hear me okay. So this is a question about Senate Bill 2305 about forcing wildfire mitigation workforce. Maybe a multi-part question, but I heard a little bit about an internship program potentially with the State Forest Service and CSU. So as I read the bill, it talks about the expansion of existing forestry programs, including wildfire mitigation. But it makes me wonder if might be outside the scope of this bill potentially, but makes you think about an internship program specifically for wildfire mitigation, not just forestry component. So I just wanted to see if James, one of the others, could talk a little bit about that. Wildfire mitigation specific component considered in that program.
Thanks, Steve. I think I caught a little bit of that. It was kind of choppy on my end, making sure that I heard the question correctly. You're looking at Senate Bill 5 and you were doing some reading specifically on the internship section. And you were wondering, I know that I had said that it was specifically timber industry related, if there was opportunities for kind of wildfire kind of internships. Is that the question?
Specifically wildfire mitigation internship, not just forestry or timber.
I'll have to go double check. Based on just the way that the bill is written, it does say timber industry, but I think that can encompass a whole lot of other kind of sectors that we deal with. Probably have to get some guidance, but me speaking very candidly, there is a nexus between wildfire mitigation and the timber industry and the way that they work together. So I think it would, once we kind of adopt those rules, I think it would be important for us to take that perspective into consideration. And I don't see why it couldn't be kind of conveyed in that way. But we'll have to go and double check. And I'm happy to bring that kind of recommendation to the group that's going to be creating the rules and administering the internship program.
Yeah, that's a tough one because it's kind of so little money and such a small program to begin with. But, you know, if there's a hard time finding timber contractors who are wanting to foot the bill for all but $5,000 worth of an internship or something, there may be other sectors that can take that and use that now. And especially thinking about a lot of the wildfire mitigation organizations we have around the state that are always looking for that support as well. Great. How about thinking back to any of our DNR bills, more on State Forest Service? Other questions that you guys have while we have the ears of these folks? Chris, go ahead.
I just wanted to answer a question publicly that I got in private. So the question was raised if how long the term is for the appointments for the Wetland Resiliency Code Board. And so there are 3-year terms, but the initial terms have to be staggered according to the bill. So that no more than 7 people are replaced at any one time. So after the first 3 years, then there'll be 3-year appointments, but we have to stagger those first appointments. I hope that makes sense.
So if you really wanted to be a lucky person and get on for just 1 year to help hash it out, that's a potential. And I did drop in the chat too, Chris. I don't know if you saw it, but there's I have gone through and pulled a table of what all the appointments representations are and who they're appointed by. So that can give you a quick look just at that part versus the whole legislation, if that's helpful. Because we really do need to find people, you guys will need to find people who are the right people for that board, and, you know, not there with some ulterior motive, but actually know something about the intent of that legislation. So, go ahead, James.
Thanks again, Steve. I went ahead and pulled up that that bill language, and it actually specifically says that we can. So I'm reading directly from the bill, and it's saying states timber, forest health, and wildfire mitigation industries. So we should be able to take that and roll with it with not just being specifically timber related. So thanks again for that question.
Thanks for checking that, for that clarification, James. That's great. I also see a question from Dom, and want to acknowledge some good thoughts from Kathleen. I don't think they're questions, but some great comments about the kind of the way things are unfolding in California, and how there's maybe the multiplying effects of stacked effects of some of the regulations and the fires happening that then lead to more interest in mitigation and then more support for mitigation. So thank you for that conversation. Dom, or Dome, I don't want to get your name wrong. Do you want to come off mute and ask about the application across the state of this legislation that's being shared here?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm the emergency manager for the city of Greeley, and just we're working through our community wildfire protection plan, and of course, you know, trying to keep up on the legislation that's going through. I see a lot of it does kind of pertain to forested areas with the State Forest Service, and I haven't read through the bills yet. But just my basic question is this the legislation that we've talked here today about, like the code compliance and everything that we've discussed, if that's applying to the entire state or just like the wildland urban interface? Curious about the grassland urban interface on the Eastern Plains.
I can answer for Senate Bill 166. And it's a good question, Dom. So actually with that one, the Wildland Resiliency Code Board will have to determine where these codes apply in Colorado. So that's part of their commissioning, is to figure that out. So we don't know yet where it's going to apply until they've determined it.
Chris, that's a really important update for anybody thinking about wanting to be on that board. That that's on top of just deciding what those minimum standards should be statewide. That aspect of where they need to apply is going to be a big, heavy question that many of us have been tracking on what happened in Oregon with that, and some people very closely. So heavy lift for sure.
Do you want me to address Raina's? Raina?
Oh. Yes, please.
Okay. The question is, can insurance companies use core public records to request access to private homeowners' home ignition zone assessment reports to use them against the homeowner in terms of coverage? I am not aware that anyone, the insurance companies are requesting. Almost all of the insurance companies have a relationship in which they do a wildfire risk assessment score, basically a wildfire insurance score, that they are provided through a third party, CoreLogic, there any number, ISO has a number that they score properties on an individual basis based on the situation of that particular property. And that is how the insurance companies score properties and then determine whether they will write them or not write them. So in addressing some of Kathleen's aspects, you know, we work very closely with our colleagues in California We're well aware of, what they are requiring in mitigation. We are also well aware of the challenges that, we are seeing more and more carriers withdraw from areas and even from the state. They're withdrawing from the state in California. We have not had a carrier totally withdraw from Colorado, but we're very, very much aware of what's happened in the past 2 months and trying to make sure that people have accessibility to coverage and that we have carriers who will write in Colorado.
Thank you. I'm glad you caught that question. I missed that one come into the chat. So please call me out if I'm missing other ones as they come through.
If somebody actually hears of an insurance company requesting that, then we want to know about it. So please report it to the division.
Okay. What other questions do you all have? Or I'll turn that the other way too and say, for those of you who have some responsibility for implementing these, if you want to take any time to ask your questions and what your needs are further, please feel free to chime in too. Yeah, and we covered it all. I'm impressed. I was just going into planning this. It's really interesting to see how things move and how quickly some things move and how I think everybody needs to take a deep breath after the legislative session is over to figure out what does that mean, what got butchered during the process, what's funded, what's not funded, and to sort through how that's going to actually turn into the intention of the legislation on the ground. So this is really interesting timing. But as I heard from many of our presenters today, there's going to be further opportunities for input with the internship and materials for workforce development around forestry and wildfire mitigation. Even on the insurance side, Peg, it sounded like there was some room there to figure out what the rules are going to be around the FAIR plan. Definitely with the new Wildfire Resilient Homes grant and a real need there from the Department of Public Safety to find good people to be on that resiliency code board. And there's also a lot of great comments just following up on Peg, your request, if anybody has gone looking to the insurance industry to get to the division of insurance to get reports, to get your reports and some feedback that no one's used that on the negative side. The insurance companies are not asking for that from DOI, which is exactly what I've heard and what we teach in mitigation best practices courses. That's the insurance companies have much more sophisticated ways of figuring out whether or not they're going to insure your home, and it's not just based on wildfire risk, right? There's a lot to that.
Absolutely right. Thanks.
Okay. I'll give a big pregnant pause for any more questions that you may have of these folks. Well, thank you all so much for coming to share with us today and asking questions. If any questions come up after this call, feel free to send them my way and I'll get them to the appropriate agency. Some of them also drop their emails in the chat. I am going to post a quick, nope, that's not the right thing. I have a quick review form if you're willing to give us feedback on how the presentation went today. Please do so. And aside from that, I'll give you back a little bit more time of your day. Please fill out that feedback form if you can. And thank you all to our presenters.